The world ended not with a whimper, but with the sickening crunch of metal on asphalt and the explosive pop of airbags. Own moment, Harper was laughing at a joke on the radio, her hand resting warmly on her husband's thigh as they navigated the slick, rain-lashed highway leading back into the city. The next, a black SUV swerved violently across 3 lanes, clipping the front of their sedan and sending them spinning into the guardrail. Glass shattered, the world tilted sideways, Harper. Martin's voice was ragged, distant. "Harper, arc you okay?" Harper groaned, her head swimming. A warm trickle of blood ran down her temple, stinging her eye. "I think so," she whispered, her hands shaking as she fumbled with her seatbelt. "My arm, it hurts." But Martin wasn't looking at her. He wasn't checking her pulse or brushing the glass from her hair. His eyes were fixed on the rearview mirror, wide with a kind of panic she had never seen before, not even when his company's stock took a nosedive last year. "Oh God," he breathed. "That's her car. That's her." Before Harper could ask who her was, Martin had kicked his door open. He scrambled out into the pouring rain, ignoring the blaring horns and the screech of tires as traffic swerved around the wreckage. "Martin!" Harper screamed, finally freeing herself. She stumbled out of the car, her knees buckling on the wet pavement. "Martin, wait, you're hurt." He didn't hear her. He was running toward the black SUV that had caused the accident, the one crumpled against the median. He wrenched the driver's side door open with a strength born of desperation. Inside was a blonde petite clutching her steering wheel and sobbing hysterically. "Rose," Martin's voice cracked. "Rose, look at me. Are you hurt?" Harper froze. The rain soaked through her thin blouse, chilling her to the bone. But it was the name that froze her blood. Rose Hayes, the college ex-girlfriend, the one Martin swore he hadn't spoken to in 10 years, the one whose Instagram handle, Vintage Rose Harper, had stalked late at night during the first insecure months of their marriage, until Martin assured her she was ancient history. Martin. The woman wailed, throwing her arms around his neck as he pulled her from the car. She looked perfectly fine, not a scratch on her porcelain skin, but she clung to him like a drowning victim. "I have got you," Martin murmured, pressing his face into her hair, oblivious to his wife standing 10 feet away, bleeding from a head wound. "I have got you, Rose. I'm here." Rose, the word hit Harper, harder than the airbag had, for 5 years. Martin had filled their penthouse with roses, every anniversary, every birthday, even just random Tuesdays. "Roses for my love," he'd say, with that charming, boyish grin that made her knees weak. Harper hated roses. They made her sneeze, and the scent gave her a mild headache. But she never had the heart to tell him, because she thought it was his romantic gesture for her. Now, watching him cradle this woman in the middle of a highway disaster scene, the truth slotted into place like a key in a lock. He wasn't buying roses for Harper. He was buying them because they reminded him of her. A siren wailed in the distance. The paramedics arrived, their lights flashing red and blue against the gray sky. "Sir, step back," a frantic EMT shouted, rushing toward them. "Check her," Martin yelled, pointing at Rose. "She's in shock. She needs help." "Sir, your wife is bleeding from the head," the EMT countered, gesturing to Harper, who was swaying slightly, her vision blurring at the edges. Martin turned then, finally looking at Harper. For a split second, confusion clouded his handsome features, as if he had forgotten she was even in the car with him. "Harper," he said, his voice dropping. "You're okay, right? You're tough, Rose. She's fragile. She has anxiety. I need to go with her in the ambulance." "You're strong" is the greatest scam ever sold to women. It isn't a compliment, darlings. It's a permission slip for neglect. Martin didn't leave Harper on that highway because he didn't care. He left because he knew she was competent enough to call her own tow truck. He categorized his wife as maintenance, free so he could spend all his emotional bandwidth on his favorite charity case. Stop being so capable that you become invisible. What? Harper whispered. The rain mingled with the blood on her face. Martin, I could have a concussion. I know, he said, already turning back to Rose, who was now being loaded onto a stretcher, weeping dramatically. Just meet me at the hospital. Okay, call my insurance. Handle the tow truck. Please, Harper. She has no one else in this city. And then he was gone. He climbed into the back of the ambulance, holding Rose's hand, leaving his wife standing alone on the side of the highway with a wrecked car and a shattered heart. Harper didn't cry. Not yet. She stared at the retreating lights of the ambulance until they disappeared into the gloom. Ma'am? A police officer touched her shoulder gently. Do you need a ride to the ER? Yes, Harper said, her voice hollow. But not to the same one as my husband. Later that night, after 6 stitches and a CT scan that confirmed a mild concussion, Harper took a cab home to their silent, empty apartment. The vase of red roses on the kitchen island, freshly bought yesterday, seemed to mock her. Their velvety petals looked like drops of blood in the dim light. She walked over to the vase, picked it up, and hurled it into the trash compactor. The shatter of glass was the most satisfying sound she'd heard all day. Her phone buzzed on the counter. It was Martin. Rose is stabilized, just panic attacks and whiplash. I'm staying until she falls asleep. Don't wait up. Love you. Harper stared at the screen. Love you. The words looked like a foreign language. She walked into the bedroom and opened the drawer of Martin's nightstand. She knew his iPad passcode. It was their wedding date, or so she thought. She tried it. Incorrect, she frowned. She tried his birthday, incorrect. She paused, her fingers hovering over the glass. Then, with a sick feeling in her gut, she typed in 0 to 6 -1 -5, the 15th of June. Not a birthday, not an anniversary. It opened. It was the date of his college graduation, the day he and Rose had broken up. Harper navigated to his photos there. Buried deep within a hidden folder labeled Project Blue were hundreds of photos, not of blueprints or architectural designs, but of Rose screenshots of her Instagram stories, saved photos from her blog. And one photo, dated today, taken inside the ambulance. It was just their hands, fingers intertwined. Rose's perfectly manicured nails resting against Martin's wedding ring. Harper didn't scream. She didn't throw the iPad. Instead, a cold, hard clarity settled over her. She went to the bathroom, washed the dried blood from her face, and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the sweet, accommodating Harper who planned dinner parties and laughed at bad jokes. That woman had died on the highway. Okay, Martin, she whispered to the empty room. You want a rose? I'll give you the thorns. The front door clicked open at 6 a.m. Harper was sitting in the wingback armchair in the living room, a cup of cold coffee in her hands. She hadn't slept. The bandage on her forehead itched under her bangs, a stark white reminder of the chaos 12 hours ago. Martin walked in, looking disheveled but energized. His tie was loosened, his top button undone. He carried the faint, cloying scent of vanilla, and unmistakably, roses. It wasn't the smell of a fresh bouquet. It was the expensive, heavy perfume Rose Hayes had worn since her freshman year at Stanford. He paused when he saw Harper sitting in the dark, illuminated only by the gray dawn light filtering through the floor to ceiling windows of their Manhattan penthouse. Harper? He sounded surprised, not guilty. Why are you up? You should be resting. I could ask you the same thing, Harper said, her voice steady. She didn't rise to greet him. She didn't offer to take his coat. Martin sighed, rubbing his face with both hands. It was a gesture designed to elicit sympathy, the weary warrior returning from battle. It was a nightmare at the hospital. Rose, she was a mess. The doctors were worried about delayed concussion symptoms. She has no family here, Harper. No one. I couldn't just leave her in a waiting room. I was in a waiting room, Harper pointed out softly. I had a concussion. I took an Uber home. Martin flinched, but quickly recovered. You're different, Harper. You're strong. You handle things. Rose is fragile. She falls apart if the wind blows the wrong way. You're strong. It was the compliment men gave women right before they handed them a burden they didn't want to carry. Is she okay now? Harper asked, testing the waters. Yeah, she's at her hotel. She's going through a really messy divorce, apparently. Her ex sounds like a monster. She just needed a friend. He walked over, leaned down, and kissed Harper on the cheek. His lips were cold. I'm sorry about the car, honey. Insurance will cover it. Why don't you go specifically to the spa today? Reset on me. He was buying her silence with a facial. Harper watched him walk into the bedroom to shower, washing the scent of another woman off his skin so he could crawl into their marital bed and sleep the sleep of the self-righteous. 3 days later, the fragile Rose Hayes seemed to have made a miraculous recovery. Except, she wasn't recovering in private. She was recovering online. Harper sat in her office at the gallery, her phone resting on a stack of invoices. Her thumb hovered over the Instagram app. She had created a burner account, no profile picture, generic name, just to watch. Faye Vintagros had posted a new story an hour ago. The photo was artfully composed, a delicate, perfectly manicured hand resting on a white tablecloth interlaced with a man's larger hand. On the man's wrist was a watch. It wasn't just any watch. It was a vintage Patek Philippe with a distinct scratch on the bezel. A scratch Harper knew well because she had accidentally made it when she dropped the watch on their honeymoon in Italy. She had cried, Martin had laughed, and said it gave the watch character. The caption read, "Storms are scary, but some anchors hold fast. Grateful for the ones who never really left. Number my rock." Number Soltis Harper felt a physical blow to her chest. It was a public staking of a claim. Rose wasn't just thanking a friend, she was marking territory. She was telling the world and Harper, if she was watching, that she had history, that she had seniority. Harper screenshot the image. Another piece of evidence for the folder she had started compiling on her own cloud drive, password, protected, named Exit Strategy. That evening, the sky over New York turned a bruised purple, the air pressure dropped, heavy and suffocating. A summer storm was rolling in, the kind that rattled the windows of the skyscrapers. Harper hated storms. When she was 7, a tree had crashed through the roof of her childhood home during a tornado, pinning her in her room for 4 hours. Thunder made her heart palpitate, lightning made her freeze. It was irrational, she knew, but phobias didn't negotiate with logic. Martin knew this. For 5 years, whenever it stormed, he would cancel plans, close the blackout curtains, and turn up the jazz music to drown out the thunder. Tonight, Harper had planned a special dinner. She had news, important news that might, just might, fix the crack in their foundation. It's getting bad out there, Martin muttered, glancing out the window as lightning forked across the Hudson River. Yeah, Harper said, her hands trembling slightly as she set a roast chicken on the table. Can you turn on the music, please? Sure. Martin reached for the remote, but his phone buzzed violently on the marble countertop. He froze. He looked at the screen. He looked at Harper. "I have to take this," he said, his voice tight. "Martin, we're about to eat." A crack of thunder shook the building. Harper flinched, dropping her fork. Use the clatter to hide her fear. "It's Rose," he said, not even bothering to lie anymore. He answered the call right there in the kitchen. "Rose, breathe. Just breathe." "Where are you?" Harper watched him. He was using his soothing voice, the one he used to use for her during storms. Okay, I know. It's loud, I know you're scared. No, don't go outside. Stay in the bathroom if it helps, I'm coming." Harper stood up. "You're what?" Martin hung up and shoved his phone into his pocket. "She's having a panic attack. Her hotel room has floor-to-ceiling windows. She feels like the lightning is going to hit her. She's hysterical. Harper, she can't breathe." "I can't breathe." Harper's voice rose, a rare display of loss of control. "Martin, I have the phobia. I am your wife. You know what storms do to me?" Martin looked at her with a mix of pity and annoyance. "Harper, you're an adult. You've been going to therapy for years, Rose is. She's in a crisis. Her ex used to lock her out in storms. It's PTSD. I have to go. It's the right thing to do. If you walk out that door," Harper said, her voice shaking, "don't expect me to be here when you get back." "Stop with the drama," Martin snapped, grabbing his keys. "I'll be back in an hour. Just put on some headphones." The door slammed shut. The silence that followed was louder than the thunder. Harper stood in the kitchen, the smell of roast chicken turning her stomach. The lightning flashed again, illuminating the empty apartment, the empty chair, the empty marriage. But this time, she didn't cower. The anger was hotter than the fear. The power grid flickered, and then, with a groan of dying machinery, the entire block went dark. The penthouse plunged into blackness. Harper navigated the dark room by memory, her heart hammering against her ribs. But she didn't reach for a flashlight. She reached into her pocket. She walked to the window, the lightning flashes acting as a strobe light. In the brief, violent bursts of illumination, she looked down at the small plastic stick in her hand. 2 pink lines. She was pregnant. She had planned to tell him over dinner. She had planned to say, "We're having a baby. Let's start over." Instead, she stood alone in the dark, watching the headlights of her husband's car merge into traffic, speeding toward another woman. "No," she whispered, her hand closing into a fist around the test. "Not we, just me." She didn't cry for Martin then. She cried for the baby who already had a father who would choose a ghost over his own flesh and blood. And as the thunder rolled again, shaking the floor beneath her feet, Harper made a promise. She would weather this storm alone, and when the sun came up, she would be the one bringing the lightning. 3 weeks slipped by in a blur of quiet hostility. Their multi-level townhouse, once a sanctuary filled with the warmth of shared dinners and evening chatter, had turned into a cold, echoing mausoleum. Martin was practically a ghost. Whenever he was home, he was on his phone, pacing the hardwood floors. His voice dropped to an urgent whisper, endlessly managing Rose's messy divorce. According to him, Rose's ex-husband was a volatile lunatic, and Rose was too fragile to navigate the legal system alone. Martin had taken it upon himself to act as her bodyguard, her therapist, and her proxy attorney. Harper didn't weep. She didn't beg. That Friday morning, she simply pulled her structured leather weekender from the top shelf of the closet and began filling it with sweaters. "What are you doing?" Martin appeared in the bedroom doorway, holding a cup of coffee. He looked exhausted, but his eyes darted to the suitcase with sudden alarm. "I'm leaving, Martin," Harper said evenly, folding a silk blouse. She hadn't told him about the baby, Every time she had tried, Rose's name had swallowed the oxygen in the room. Harper flatly refused to use her unborn child as a pawn to win back her husband's attention. "Leaving?" Martin scoffed, stepping into the room. He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "Harper, please stop being so dramatic. We're adults. You're throwing away a 5-year marriage because I'm helping a friend file a restraining order. Do you hear how crazy and jealous that sounds?" Harper paused. She looked at him, really looked at him. The man she had married was standing right in front of her, but he felt like a stranger wearing a Martin suit. "I'm not jealous, Martin," she replied, her voice eerily calm. "Jealousy implies I want what she has. I don't want a part-time husband who uses his savior complex to justify an emotional affair. I'm disgusted. You're playing white knight while your own home is burning to the ground." Martin's jaw tightened. "You're twisting this. Rose is terrified for her life. Her ex, Marcus, has been tracking her. I'm just trying to be a decent human being." He set his coffee down with a sharp clack. "I have to go meet with her lawyer. We'll talk about this paranoia of yours when I get back. Unpack your bag, Harper." He turned on his heel and walked out. A minute later, the heavy oak front door slammed shut. Harper exhaled a shaky breath, pressing a hand to her still, flat stomach. The stress was toxic. She needed to get out of this house today. An hour later, as she zipped up her bag, a violent, rhythmic pounding echoed from the front door downstairs. Harper frowned. Martin must have forgotten his briefcase again. She made her way down the sweeping oak staircase to the foyer. "I'm coming, Martin, hold on," she muttered, undoing the deadbolt and swinging the thick door open. It wasn't Martin. A man shoved his way inside before Harper could even process his face. He was tall, heavily built, and reeked of stale nicotine and erratic, buzzing energy. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, darting around the elegant foyer. "Where is she?" he barked, his voice grating like sandpaper. Harper took a quick step back, her adrenaline spiking. "Who are you? Get out of my house, or I'm calling the police." "Don't play stupid with me," the man sneered, taking another step forward. He noticed the framed wedding photos of Harper and Martin on the console table. A nasty smile curled his lips. "Ah, you're the wife!" Harper's blood ran cold. Marcus Rose's ex-husband. "Martin's car has been parked outside her hotel all week. I put a tracker on the bumper," Marcus growled, stepping closer, his bulk trapping Harper between the console table and the bottom of the grand staircase. "He thinks he can hide my wife from me. Tell him to bring her out." "She's not here," Harper said, forcing her voice to stay strong, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She slowly reached her hand backward, feeling for the heavy bronze vase on the table. "My husband isn't here either. You need to leave right now." "Liar," Marcus roared. The sudden explosion of rage was terrifying. He lunged forward. Harper didn't cower. She grabbed the bronze vase and swung it, catching his shoulder. Marcus cursed, stumbling back, but the blow only enraged him further. With a vicious snarl, he grabbed Harper by the arms. "You think you're so tough, you tell your boy, scout husband, that if he doesn't keep his hands off my wife, I'll bury him." Harper fought, twisting fiercely in his grip, kicking at his shins. "Let me go, tell him to back off," Marcus yelled, violently shoving her away from him. It was a blind, brutal push born of sheer frustration. Harper was already off balance. Her heel caught on the edge of the woven rug at the base of the stairs. She fell backward. The world tilted into a sickening spiral. Her shoulder hit the sharp edge of the second step, but it was the twisting impact of her lower back against the hardwood landing that stole the breath from her lungs. She tumbled down the jagged flight, a heavy, agonizing cascade of bone against wood, until she hit the marble floor of the foyer. A sharp, searing pain tore through her abdomen. It was instantaneous and catastrophic. Above her, Marcus froze, panting. He looked at Harper's crumpled form. Panic suddenly flashing in his bloodshot eyes. "Crazy bitch!" he stammered before turning and sprinting out the open front door, into the street. Harper lay on the cold marble, her vision swimming in dark, fuzzy spots. A deep, cramping agony radiated through her pelvis, followed by a terrible, damp warmth pooling beneath her. Number no, no, no. Tears leaked from her eyes. She clawed at her pocket with trembling, numb fingers, pulling out her phone. The screen was cracked, but she managed to hit Martin's contact. It rang once, twice, 3 times. She gasped for air, the pain blinding her. "Pick up, please, Martin, pick up." The call went to voicemail. Harper dropped her head against the floor, a choked sob tearing from her throat. A second later, the phone buzzed against the marble. It wasn't a callback. It was an automated quick reply text message. "Can't talk right now. Rose is having a panic attack." There is no silence louder than an automated text message during a tragedy. While Harper was losing their future on the cold marble floor, Martin was busy managing the weather for a woman who refuses to buy blackout curtains. He prioritized a grown woman's fear of thunder over his wife's actual life and death crisis. If he is too busy playing therapist to answer your emergency call, make sure his number is blocked when he finally tries to call back. Harper stared at the glowing white letters through a veil of tears. A hollow, freezing emptiness began to swallow the agonizing pain in her body. The husband she had loved was gone. The baby she had fought to protect was slipping away. She slowly lowered the phone, her hand resting on her stomach. Her breath grew shallow, and as the edges of her vision finally faded to black, the last tear she would ever shed for Martin slipped down her cheek. The world returned in fragments. First, it was the rhythmic, relentless beep, beep, beep of a heart monitor. Then the sharp, astringent smell of bleach and iodine. Finally, the heavy, suffocating weight in her lower abdomen, an aching emptiness that screamed louder than any physical pain she had ever endured. Harper opened her eyes. The harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room momentarily blinded her. She blinked, her vision slowly pulling into focus. "You're awake." A woman in a white coat was standing at the foot of her bed, her expression a careful mask of professional sympathy. Harper tried to speak, but her throat felt like crushed glass. She swallowed hard, her hand instinctively drifting down to rest on her stomach beneath the thin hospital blanket. It was gone. She didn't need the doctor to say the words her body already knew. The tiny spark of life she had carried, the secret hope she had clung to in the dark, had been extinguished on the cold marble of her foyer. "Mrs. Vance," the doctor said softly, stepping closer. "You suffered a severe blunt force trauma and a pelvic fracture. A delivery driver found your front door open and called 911. We did everything we could, but I'm so incredibly sorry you lost the pregnancy." Harper stared at the acoustic tiles on the ceiling. One of them had a small water stain shaped like a teardrop. She didn't cry. The tears she had shed on the floor of her home were the last she would ever give to this life. Instead, a profound, terrifying calm washed over her. It was the absolute zero of the human soul. The Harper who loved Martin, who baked him chicken, who overlooked his subtle cruelties. She had bled to death on that foyer floor. The woman in the hospital bed was someone else entirely. "Has my husband been notified?" Harper's voice was a raspy whisper. completely devoid of emotion. The doctor looked uncomfortable. "We've been trying to reach him for 4 hours," he finally answered, 10 minutes ago. "He's on his way." 4 hours. Harper closed her eyes. 4 hours of her lying in surgery scraped hollow, while her husband was likely holding the hand of another woman who was frightened by a thunderstorm or a bad memory. "Thank you, Doctor," Harper said. "Please, when he gets here, don't tell him anything. I will tell him myself." 20 minutes later, the heavy door of the hospital room swung open. Martin rushed in. He was out of breath, his hair slightly rumpled, his tie missing. When he saw the IV lines, the bruising on Harper's pale face, and the rigid cast on her arm, he stopped dead in his tracks. The annoyance he usually carried when Harper interrupted, his crusades vanished, replaced by genuine shock. "Harper, oh my God." He hurried to the bedside, reaching out to take her hand. Harper pulled her hand away, tucking it under the blanket. The movement was small, but the rejection was deafening. Martin's hand hovered in the air before dropping to his side. "What happened? The hospital just said it was an emergency." "I came as fast as I could. My phone was on silent at the clinic with Rose. And Marcus," Harper interrupted, her voice striking the air like a blade. Martin froze. "What?" "Marcus broke into our house," Harper stated evenly, her eyes locking onto his. "He used the tracker he put on your car to find where you lived. He was looking for Rose, and when he couldn't find her, he found me." All the blood drained from Martin's face. He stumbled back a step, processing the words. He was in our house. He hurt you, Harper. I swear to God, I'm going to kill him. I'm calling the police right now. He can't get away with." "He threw me down the stairs, Martin." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. Martin stared at her, his mouth opening and closing wordlessly. His eyes dropped to the bruises on her neck, to the cast, and then, slowly, toward her abdomen. A primal, horrifying realization began to dawn in his eyes. "Harper," his voice broke, shrinking into something small and terrified. Why did they have to do surgery? What did he break?" Harper looked at the man she had promised her life to. She saw his guilt, his terror, his sudden crushing awareness of what his white knight complex had wrought. But looking at him didn't spark an ounce of pity in her heart. "He didn't just break my bones," Harper said, her voice dropping to a surgical whisper. "He killed our baby." Martin collapsed. He literally fell to his knees beside the bed, burying his face in his hands. A raw, guttural sob tore from his throat, a sound of absolute, devastating agony. No, Harper, please. Tell me you're lying. Please tell me you're lying, a baby. We were having a baby. I was going to tell you the night of the storm," Harper replied, her steady voice contrasting violently with his hysterical weeping. "But Rose was afraid of the lightning, and today I tried to call you as I was bleeding out on the floor, but Rose was having a panic attack." Martin reached out blindly, grabbing the edge of her blanket, weeping uncontrollably. "I'm sorry. Oh my God, Harper, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear, if I had known." "If you had known, what?" Harper tipped her head slightly, her gaze merciless. "You would have loved me. You would have protected your family. A man who only does the right thing when it's convenient isn't a good man, Martin. He's just a coward playing a part." "I'll fix this," Martin begged, lifting his tear-streaked face. "I'll never speak to her again. I'll make Marcus pay. I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you, Harper. Please, please don't look at me like that." "Look at you like what?" "Like I'm dead." Harper pressed the call button pinned to her pillow. "You are dead to me, Martin." The door opened, and a stern-faced nurse stepped in. Is everything all right in here? My husband was just leaving, Harper said, not breaking eye contact with Martin. And please note in my chart that he is no longer authorized to be here, nor is he allowed to receive medical updates. Martin scrambled to his feet, panic wild in his eyes. Harper, you can't do this. I'm your husband. We lost our child. We need to grieve together. Get out, Harper commanded, the ice in her tone making even the nurse flinch. Go back to Rose. You bought her baggage, Martin. Now you get to carry it. I'll be having my lawyer send the divorce papers to your office on Monday. Sir, you need to leave, the nurse said firmly, stepping between them. Harper, please, Martin cried out as the nurse ushered him toward the door. Please, I love you. The door clicked shut, severing his voice from the room. Harper exhaled, the silence washing over her like a cool breeze. She reached over to her bedside table, her uninjured hand picking up her battered phone. The screen was still cracked, spiderweb fractures originating from the point of impact. She opened the phone, navigated to the hidden cloud drive, and opened the folder marked Exit Strategy. She had the photos, she had the automated text. Now she had a police report involving Rose's ex-husband nearly killing her. Martin Vance was a junior partner at a highly conservative law firm that prided itself on impeccable public morals. If Martin thought losing her and the baby was the worst thing that would happen to him today, he was sorely mistaken. Harper typed out a quick message to an old college friend who was now one of the most ruthless divorce attorneys in Manhattan. I'm ready. Burn him to the ground. Sloane Kensington didn't walk into rooms. She occupied them. When she stepped into Harper's hospital room on Sunday morning, she was wearing a razor-sharp charcoal suit, a pair of stilettos that sounded like gavel strikes on the linoleum, and a predatory smile. Sloane and Harper had been college roommates. While Harper had built a career curating fine art, Sloane had built hers by financially dissecting New York's unfaithful elite. I got your message, Sloane said, dropping a sleek leather briefcase onto the visitor's chair. She didn't offer pitying looks or empty platitudes. She took one look at Harper's bruised face, the cast, and the hollowed-out look in her eyes, and her smile vanished, replaced by a terrifying, cold competence. Tell me everything. Harper did. She spoke without tears, her voice a flat, deadened monotone. She handed Sloane her unlocked phone, pointing to the Exit Strategy folder. Sloane scrolled through the screenshots, the automated text from the night of the miscarriage, and most importantly, the police report Harper had just given her statement for regarding Marcus. When Sloane finally looked up, her eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. Martin is a junior partner at Sterling and Croft, correct? Sloane asked, her manicured fingers tapping the screen. Yes, Harper replied. He's up for senior partner in 3 months. Not anymore, Sloane purred. Sterling and Croft is an old money, ultra-conservative firm. They represent generational wealth and family trusts. They have an ironclad morality clause in their partnership agreements. They absolutely despise scandal, and they abhor criminal proximities. Sloane leaned forward, resting her elbows on the bed. Martin didn't just have an emotional affair, Harper. He intertwined his life, and by extension, his firm's reputation, with a volatile, violent felon. He brought a stalker to your doorstep. You lost your baby because of his reckless negligence. Harper's chest tightened at the word baby, but she forced the emotion down, locking it in the dark box at the back of her mind. Can we use it? We aren't just going to use it, Sloane said, snapping her briefcase open to retrieve a thick stack of pristine legal documents. We are going to weaponize it. By tomorrow morning. I will have filed for an at-fault divorce based on cruel and inhuman treatment. I'm freezing the joint accounts, and I am personally sending a heavily redacted copy of this police report to Arthur Sterling under the guise of ensuring Martin's workplace safety due to Marcus being at large. Harper looked at her battered reflection in the blank television screen across the room. Burn him, Sloan. Leave nothing but ash. Monday morning at Sterling and Croft was entirely predictable until 10 a.m. Martin was sitting in his corner office, nursing a massive headache and the sinking, paralyzing realization that his marriage was over. He had spent the weekend obsessively calling Harper, only to find his number blocked. He had called her mother, her friends, even the hospital, but Sloan had erected a legal firewall around Harper that was impossible to breach. His desk phone rang. It was the managing partner's secretary. "Mr. Vance, Mr. Sterling needs to see you in his office immediately." Martin straightened his tie, practiced a confident face, and walked down the glass-paneled hallway. But the moment he opened the heavy mahogany doors to Arthur Sterling's office, his stomach dropped. Sterling, a silver-haired man who looked like he had been carved out of granite, was not alone. The firm's head of HR and their internal legal counsel were flanks on either side of his desk. Sitting in the center of Sterling's pristine blotter was a police report. "Close the door, Martin," Sterling said. His voice was quiet, which was worse than if he were yelling. "Arthur, what is going on?" Martin asked, his palms beginning to sweat as he took a seat. "I received a very concerning courier package this morning from the offices of Kensington Law." Sterling began, steepling his fingers. "It outlines an incident at your residence on Friday. An incident where a man named Marcus Thorne, a man with a history of aggravated assault, kicked in your door looking for his wife, whom you have been harboring in a hotel paid for by a Sterling and Croft corporate card." Martin felt the blood drain from his face. "Arthur, I can explain. She's a friend. She was in a crisis." "I don't care if she is Mother Teresa," Sterling snapped, his granite composure cracking. "Did this man assault your wife? Did your wife miscarry a child as a result of this altercation?" Martin's mouth went dry. He couldn't speak. He just nodded, swallowing hard against the bile rising in his throat. Sterling looked at him with profound disgust. "We handle the trusts of senators and CEOs, Martin. We sell discretion, stability, and impeccable judgment. You used company funds to play white knight in a domestic dispute that has now resulted in a violent felony at your home address. The police have been calling the front desk all morning looking for you because Marcus Thorne is still on the run. Arthur, please, my personal life." "Your personal life is a liability I am not willing to underwrite," Sterling interrupted. He gestured to the HR director. "You are being placed on an indefinite unpaid leave of absence, effective immediately pending a partnership review. Hand over your key card, your corporate phone, and vacate the premises." You are suspending me," Martin stammered, panic finally breaking through his shock. "I am up for senior partner. I brought in the Vanguard account. And you brought a violent felon to our doorstep," Sterling countered coldly. "Be grateful we aren't firing you today. Get out of my office." An hour later, Martin stood on the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, holding a cardboard box of his personal effects. The city buzzed around him, completely indifferent to the fact that his life had just been detonated. He pulled out his personal phone with shaking hands and called Rose. She answered on the second ring. "Martin, where are you?" "The hotel is asking for a new credit card for the room." "Yours was declined." Martin closed his eyes. Sloan. She had frozen the accounts. "Rose, everything is gone," Martin choked out, leaning against the cold stone of an office building. "Harper filed for divorce. She sent my firm the police report about Marcus. They suspended me, Rose. I have no job. My accounts are frozen." There was a long pause on the line, no gasp of sympathy, no soothing words for the man who had sacrificed his family for her. Weight declined. Rose's voice shifted. The fragile, breathy tone vanished. replaced by something sharp and metallic. Martin, my lawyer needs his retainer by Wednesday. You promised you'd cover it until the divorce settlement comes through. And the hotel, I can't pay for this suite. Martin opened his eyes, stunned. Rose, I just told you I lost my baby. I lost my job. I need a minute to figure this out. I need you to be there for me. I can't deal with this right now, Martin. I have PTSD, remember? She snapped, irritated. If you can't pay for the room, I'm going to have to call my sister in Connecticut and go stay in her guest room. I can't be out on the street because you couldn't handle your wife. Because you couldn't handle your wife. The line went dead. Martin slowly lowered the phone. The fragile bird with a broken wing had just flown away the exact second the breadcrumbs ran out. He had burned his entire world to the ground to keep her warm, and she was complaining about the smoke. As a heavy rain began to fall over Manhattan, soaking his expensive suit and the cardboard box in his hands, Martin finally understood what Harper had meant in the hospital. He was a coward playing a part, and the play was over. But Harper wasn't finished. As Martin's phone buzzed with a new notification, he looked down at the screen. It was an email from his real estate broker. Subject, urgent penthouse listing. Message Martin, your wife's lawyer just authorized the immediate sale of the Manhattan townhouse. I need you to pack whatever you need. The staging crew arrives tomorrow. She was erasing him, not just from her heart, but from the map. 6 weeks later, the physical bruises on Harper's body had faded to faint, yellowish green shadows. The cast had been removed, replaced by a sleek black brace. The internal wounds, the hollow ache in her pelvis, and the quiet, ghostly what-ifs would take a lifetime to heal, but Harper no longer cried. She had moved into Sloane's sprawling, ultra-secure Tribeca loft, while the townhouse was staged and sold. It sold in 4 days in an all-cash deal to an overseas investor. Harper didn't even go back to pack. She hired a premium moving service to box up her personal belongings and instructed them to leave Martin's things in a pile in the garage. Now, sitting in the glass-walled conference room of Kensington Law, Harper looked out over the Manhattan skyline. She wore a tailored ivory suit, her hair pulled back into a severe, elegant knot. She looked sharp enough to cut glass. The heavy glass door opened, and Martin walked in. Harper didn't blink, but an involuntary ripple of shock went through her. The man who sat down across the mahogany table looked like a poorly rendered copy of her husband. Martin had lost 15 pounds he couldn't afford to lose. His eyes were hollow, ringed with dark, sleepless circles. His suit, once impeccably tailored, hung loosely on his frame and looked like it had been slept in, because, in a way, it had, with joint assets frozen and no income. Martin had been forced to move into a grim extended stay motel in Queens. Sterling and Croft hadn't just suspended him. Once Marcus Thorne was arrested in a dive bar 3 weeks ago, making the local tabloids, the firm officially terminated Martin with cause, citing the morality clause. Martin was accompanied by a harried-looking discount divorce attorney who immediately seemed intimidated by Sloane Kensington's predatory smile. "Let's make this brief," Sloane said, not offering anyone a beverage. She slapped a thick manila folder onto the table. "We are here to finalize the separation agreement and asset division before the judge signs the final decree next week. Because your client is at fault, Mr. Davis, the terms are non-negotiable." Martin's lawyer, Mr. Davis, cleared his throat. "Now, Miss Kensington, New York is an equitable distribution state. My client is entitled to half the proceeds of the townhouse sale, and we'd like to negotiate the unfreezing of his personal checking." "Your client," Sloane interrupted. her voice dropping to a lethal purr. Dissipated marital assets. He spent roughly $42,000 over 3 months on a luxury hotel suite, room service and retainer fees for a woman who is not his wife. Under the law, my client is entitled to a clawback of those funds. Sloan slid a spreadsheet across the table. Furthermore, my client's medical bills, surgical costs, and trauma therapy stemming directly from an assault your client facilitated through gross negligence, total $68,000. We are deducting all of this from his half of the house proceeds. As for his 401k, he can keep it. We don't want his dirty money, we just want him gone. Martin stared at the spreadsheet, his eyes unfocused. He hadn't looked at Sloan, or even his own lawyer. His gaze was fixed entirely on Harper. Harper, Martin croaked. His voice sounded like it had been dragged over gravel. "Please, address my counsel, Martin," Harper said, her tone as placid as a frozen lake. "I have nothing," Martin pleaded, leaning forward, ignoring the protocol. He looked desperate, stripped of all the arrogance and savior, complex grandstanding that used to define him. "Sterling fired me. The legal market treats me like a leper. I have $30 in my checking account. I can't even afford to fly back to Chicago to stay with my parents." Harper simply stared at him. "And Rose?" Martin let out a bitter, wet laugh, tears springing to his eyes. "Do you know what she did, Harper? The day after you filed, when she realized my cards were declined. She moved to Connecticut. 2 weeks later, she was dating a 48-year-old hedge fund manager she met at her sister's country club. She blocked my number. She didn't even say goodbye." Harper felt a tiny, cold spark of satisfaction, but she let none of it show on her face. Rose was exactly what Harper had known her to be, a parasite who disguised her fangs as vulnerability. Martin had thrown away a fierce, loyal love to rescue a woman who only needed someone to pay her bills. "I threw away my entire life for a lie," Martin whispered, a tear slipping down his gaunt cheek. "I lost my baby. I lost my career. I lost you, Harper. I am so completely broken. Isn't this enough? Haven't you punished me enough?" Harper slowly reached onto the table. She picked up a heavy silver Mont Blanc pen. She uncapped it and slid it across the polished mahogany until it stopped directly in front of Martin. "I didn't punish you, Martin," Harper said, her voice echoing with a quiet, devastating finality. "I simply stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own choices. You built this fire, now burn in it." Martin calls it punishment. I call it physics. For years, Harper was the firewall protecting him from his own stupidity. The moment she stepped aside, gravity took over. He wasn't destroyed by a vindictive ex-wife. He was destroyed because he torched his own safety net to keep a parasite warm. Never confuse a woman removing her protection with an act of aggression. She simply stopped interrupting the disaster you created. Martin looked at the pen. He looked at the paperwork that would officially dissolve their marriage, leaving him broke, disgraced, and entirely alone. He looked at his lawyer, who offered a grim, helpless shrug. His hand trembling violently, Martin picked up the pen. He signed his name on the line, the scratch of the metal tip sounding like the closing of a coffin lid in the silent room. When he was done, Sloan smoothly slid the paperwork back to her side of the table. "Pleasure doing business, Mr. Davis. You know the way to the elevators." Martin stood up slowly. He looked like an empty shell, a ghost haunting his own life. He lingered for a fraction of a second, hoping Harper would look at him, looking for an ounce of pity, a sliver of the woman who used to leave the porch light on for him. Harper was already looking at her phone, answering an email from a prominent gallery owner in Chelsea, who had just offered her a position as head curator. With a soft, broken exhale, Martin turned and walked out the door. Sloane waited until the click of the latch echoed through the room. She let out a long breath, dropping her professional mask, and turned to Harper, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "It's done," Sloane said softly. "You're free, Harper." Harper looked out the massive windows. The Manhattan sky had cleared, the heavy storm clouds replaced by a brilliant, piercing blue. The city below was loud, sprawling, and indifferent. But for the first time in months, the air in Harper's lungs felt sweet. She touched her flat stomach one last time, an acknowledgement of the little ghost that had given her the strength to survive the fall. She would carry that love with her, not as a weight, but as armor. "Yes," Harper said, a small, true smile touching the corners of her lips as the sunlight washed over her face. "I am." Let's have a frank discussion about the fragile woman trap. Men like Martin are addiction, prone to damsels in distress because it makes them feel like knights in shining armor. But they always forget one crucial detail. Keeping a damsel is expensive, exhausting, and the loyalty usually expires the moment the check bounces. Did you notice how quickly Rose recovered? As soon as Martin's credit card declined, his fragile bird miraculously found the strength to fly to Connecticut and find a new host. She wasn't helpless, she was strategic. Harper's ultimate victory wasn't just surviving the fall. It was realizing that being the strong one didn't mean carrying a weak man. It meant having the strength to let him drop. Have you ever been punished for being the competent one in a relationship? Did you watch your partner run to a woman whose only talent was being a professional mess? Tell me your story. The comments section is open, and I am listening. Madam Readout.